just something that sticks to you, sticks to your skin, goes through to your bones, gets through to your soul. It's just been horrendous. I know that I've been innocent all along.
A man walks off stage every night to a standing ovation. The theaters are sold out. The television contracts are worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. His face is on the front of every newspaper. His voice is in every living room in Britain, and he has already lost it all. Not to a bad investment, not to a swindling accountant, not to some unforeseen catastrophe. He lost it himself, deliberately, compulsively, bet by bet. This is not a story about bad luck. It is a story about a pattern that runs with astonishing precision through 12 of the most celebrated careers in British entertainment history. Comedians, actors, a sporting legend, an aristocrat, men who built fortunes that should have lasted generations, and men who, with extraordinary consistency, handed every penny of those fortunes directly to bookmakers, casino proprietors, and the undefeated mathematics of a game designed specifically not to be won. Stay with me to the end, because the final name on this list is the only one whose story ends differently, and understanding why it ends differently is the only thing that makes any of the 12 worth studying. And if you are new here, subscribe right now. Hit that button before you go any further, because what we do on this channel is tell the stories that the official histories leave out, the real careers, the real finances, the real consequences. Sid James. We begin where British comedy itself so often begins, with Sid James. If you grew up in this country, you know that laugh, that gravelly, shameless, absolutely unmistakable cackle that became the sonic signature of an entire era of British cinema. Sid James was the engine room of the Carry On franchise, 31 films in that series, and he anchored the majority of them with a charisma that no screenwriter could manufacture and no director could instruct. Beyond Carry On, he was the cornerstone of Hancock's Half Hour, one of the defining sitcoms of the 1950s, sharing a screen with Tony Hancock in a partnership that felt genuinely electric. By the mid-1960s, Sid James was one of the highest-paid performers working in British film and television. His fee per picture was considerable. His television residuals were reliable. His public profile was so deeply embedded in the national consciousness that there was simply no shortage of work. On paper, this was a man who should have retired comfortably, left something meaningful to his family, and been remembered not only as a comedy legend, but as a man who built something lasting. The reality was altogether different. Sid James had a gambling addiction. Not a private hobby, a consuming, relentless, professionally embarrassing compulsion that followed him onto every film set and into every television studio he ever worked in. The pattern was consistent across decades. He would receive his salary, and before he had made it home, a significant portion, sometimes the entirety, would be gone. Handed to bookmakers, lost at casinos, consumed by the horses. It was not uncommon for James to approach film producers mid-shoot and request advances on wages he had not yet earned, purely to settle debts that had accumulated since his last payment. Consider what that means in practical terms. A man at the absolute top of his industry, with a face recognized by every household in Britain, going cap in hand to a producer to ask for money he was owed in advance because he had already lost the previous payment at the track. This was not a one-off. This was the recurring architecture of his financial life. The domestic consequences were significant. His family lived under a permanent cloud of financial anxiety. When Sid James died on the 26th of April, 1976, collapsing on stage at the Sunderland Empire mid-performance in front of a live audience, the nation mourned a comedy titan. What emerged more quietly in the weeks and months that followed was the sobering state of his estate. Despite decades at the very top of the industry, despite an output that by any calculation should have generated a genuine fortune, the estate he left behind was, by all credible accounts, in a state of near insolvency. He was one of the most beloved figures in the history of British entertainment. But the private ledger of his life tells a different story entirely. Bobby Davro. Move forward a decade, and you find Bobby Davro, a name that, for anyone who grew up watching British television in the 1980s, is inseparable from Saturday night prime time. Davro was a genuinely gifted impressionist and comedian who emerged from the South Coast entertainment circuit and rapidly ascended to the very top of the British variety world. His Saturday night shows pulled audiences measured in the tens of millions. His contracts with the major networks were lucrative. He was, for a sustained period, one of the most visible entertainers in the country, performing to packed houses and commanding fees that reflected his status as a genuine primetime asset. What the viewing public did not see was what was happening in parallel. Davro was losing money, serious money, with a frequency and a scale that would have alarmed any financial advisor paying attention. A single afternoon at the racecourse could cost him thousands. An evening in one of London's more discreet gaming establishments could cost him considerably more. The same competitive drive that made him formidable on stage, the desire to win, to dominate, to outperform, became actively destructive when applied to gambling. Because the fundamental difference between a stage and a casino is that on a stage, talent matters. At a roulette wheel, it does not. As the entertainment landscape shifted through the 1990s and the era of the all-conquering Saturday night variety show gave way to different formats and newer faces, Davro's high-value network contracts became less frequent. And it was precisely at the moment when his income began to contract that the accumulated damage of years of heavy gambling became impossible to manage. He was forced to sell luxury properties. He moved into substantially more modest circumstances. The public narrative of the cheerful, successful entertainer was replaced, at least temporarily, by a rather more uncomfortable one, a man who had earned a considerable fortune and lost the vast majority of it to a private habit. He was no longer working from a position of financial security. He was working because he had to. Des O'Connor. Des O'Connor is perhaps the most surprising name on this list because his public image, that warm, self-deprecating, endlessly professional entertainer, seemed to embody financial prudence rather than recklessness. His career was, by any standard, remarkable. Over 6 decades in the industry, he worked as a singer, a comedian, and a chat show host of genuine caliber. His long-running variety shows were network staples. His international recording career generated real commercial success. As a chat show host, he had a talent for putting world-class guests at ease that very few of his contemporaries could match. He was, in industry terms, a reliable and high-value asset. But within inner circles among financial advisors and industry insiders who saw the reality behind the polished exterior, there was a known and serious concern about O'Connor's relationship with the racecourse. He was a devoted enthusiast of horse racing, and his involvement went considerably beyond casual spectating. He placed substantial wagers, and during a particular period in the middle of his career, those wagers went catastrophically wrong. The losses he sustained during this period brought his personal estate to a point of genuine crisis. The response was not to step back and reassess. It was to work harder to take on an exhausting schedule of live performances, international touring engagements, and television commitments that would, over time, replenish what had been lost. He managed, through sheer professional output, to keep his creditors at bay and avoid the public humiliation of a formal insolvency. His millions of fans were entirely unaware that any of this was happening. He died in November 2020, a wealthy man by the end. But the journey from those early catastrophic losses to that final position of stability was a road paved with exhausting professional obligation and private financial anxiety that never fully left him. He himself acknowledged that the experience gave him a profound and permanent understanding of how rapidly a lifetime's work can be endangered by a single, sustained period of reckless wagering. Freddie Starr. If Des O'Connor's story is about quiet, hidden financial crisis, Freddie Starr's is its polar opposite: loud, spectacular, and ultimately devastating. Starr was one of the most genuinely unpredictable and explosive performers the British variety era ever produced. His manic energy, his willingness to do absolutely anything for a reaction, his complete disregard for conventional comedic structure, these qualities made him a phenomenon. At the height of his fame in the 1970s and early 1980s, he was earning tens of thousands of pounds per week. He owned racehorses. He lived in properties that could genuinely be described as palatial. By the metrics of the era, he was untouchably successful. The problem was that the same volatility that made him extraordinary on stage made him catastrophically reckless with money off it. He placed massive bets on a whim on his own horses, on other horses, in high-stakes casino environments. He could lose enormous sums in a single day's racing without apparent concern, because the money had always come back before. And the instinct was that it always would. It didn't. As his popularity declined in the late 1980s and into the 1990s, partly due to the changing tastes of television audiences, partly due to his own increasingly erratic public behavior, the professional opportunities that had generated his income became less frequent and less lucrative. But the debts accumulated during the years of excess did not shrink with his income. They remained. They grew. The legal and financial battles that followed stripped away his assets with a thoroughness that left nothing standing. The final chapter of Freddie Starr's life was lived in self-imposed exile in Spain. He was declared bankrupt. His homes were gone. His savings were gone. The man who had been, by credible accounts, among the highest-paid entertainers working in Britain, died in May 2019 inches, a small rented apartment in Mijas on the Costa del Sol. He remains a symbol of the variety era's most extravagant excesses, a performer whose talent was ultimately consumed by the very same volcanic instability that had made him such a compelling figure to watch. Before we continue, if you haven't already subscribed to Vintage Uncovered, do it now. This is the channel that tells you what the documentaries leave out, what the biographers gloss over, and what the official record quietly buries. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us, because the next name on this list is the one that will genuinely surprise you: Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas was, in the most precise sense, a creation, a meticulously constructed persona of the caddish, gap-toothed upper-class British rogue that became one of the most internationally recognizable faces in cinema during the 1950s and 1960s. His performances in films made on both sides of the Atlantic established him as a genuine international star, not merely a British success, but a name with currency in Hollywood. The fortune this generated allowed him to live precisely as his screen characters suggested he might. A sprawling Mediterranean villa, membership of the most exclusive clubs in London, an existence of refined and very public luxury. The private reality was that Terry Thomas viewed his wealth not as a resource to be preserved, but as something to be deployed on grand gestures, on horse racing, on the kind of social wagering that was in his circles as much a performance of status as it was a genuine attempt to win money. For years, the income covered the losses. The machine kept running. Then came Parkinson's disease, and the machine stopped. As his health deteriorated through the late 1960s and into the 1970s, his ability to work to generate the income that had always, just barely, kept pace with his spending and his losses vanished. But the compulsion to wager did not vanish with it. If anything, it intensified. There is a particular and heartbreaking logic to this. A man who has always believed the next bet will restore what the last bet took, doubling down as the stakes become existential. By the end of his life, Terry Thomas was living in a small, charity-funded flat. The Mediterranean villa was gone. The club memberships were gone. The wardrobe of beautifully tailored suits that had been as much a part of his identity as his cigarette holder, all of it gone. His fellow actors organized a benefit concert simply to provide him with basic living expenses. He died in January 1990, a man who had defined a certain flavor of British screen elegance for an entire generation and who had traded every remnant of the fortune that elegance had generated for a succession of losing hands. Alex Higgins. Alex Hurricane Higgins is, without question, one of the most significant sporting figures this country has ever produced, not merely because of what he achieved at the snooker table, but because of what he did to snooker. He took a game perceived as the preserve of working men's clubs and quiet afternoon television and turned it into a genuine primetime spectacle. A two-time world champion, 1,972 and 1,982. During the 1980s, at the peak of the sport's television popularity, he was a genuine national celebrity, recognizable to people who had never watched a frame of snooker in their lives. The prize money, the exhibition fees, the endorsements these generated millions, the fast cars, the expensive suits, the constant public attention, these were the visible markers of a man who had, from the most unpromising beginnings in Belfast, arrived at the very top of his profession. The betting shops, however, were where it all went. Higgins was a compulsive gambler in the most comprehensive sense of the term. He would wager on anything: greyhounds, horse racing, football, the weather. The sums involved were frequently enormous. Tens of thousands of pounds in a single afternoon was not unusual. And crucially, unlike at the snooker table, where his genius gave him a genuine edge, at the bookmakers he had no edge at all. He lost as consistently and as comprehensively as any punter, but with the resources of a sporting champion to lose with. His volatile temperament, which made him so compelling to watch as a competitor, made him incapable of walking away from a losing streak. The instinct was always to increase the stake, to prove that the next bet would be the one that turned it around. It never did. The prize money disappeared as quickly as it arrived. By the end of his life, Alex Higgins was living in sheltered housing in Belfast. His health was catastrophic. He had battled throat cancer, and the illness had taken a severe physical toll. In his latter years, he was sometimes seen in local betting shops, trying to multiply small amounts into something meaningful, bringing to the task the same desperate concentration he had once applied to World Championship frames. He died in July 2010 inches that sheltered housing flat. The man who had once held snooker's world in his hands ended his journey with nothing. Jimmy Tarbuck. Jimmy Tarbuck is one of the defining figures of British variety television. A man who rose from working-class Liverpool to become the face of Sunday night at the London Palladium, commanding audiences of millions and earning fees that placed him among the highest-paid entertainers of the 1960s and 70s. His story is perhaps the most quietly instructive on this list. Not because it ended in spectacular public ruin, it did not. It ended in something, in some respects, more sobering. A man who never stopped working because he could never afford to stop. Tarbuck's relationship with betting the racecourse, the casino, the exclusive gaming establishments of London was the defining private fact of his professional life. His competitive drive, which was the engine of his success on stage, became a liability in environments where drive and talent are entirely irrelevant. The losses accumulated, the financial pressure created an obligation to continue performing not from creative passion, but from sheer necessity. The vast earnings of his golden years were steadily redirected away from building a lasting family estate and towards settling debts, covering losses, maintaining a facade of success. He transitioned gradually and invisibly from a man of independent wealth to an entertainer who was required to keep the machine running indefinitely. His story is a reminder that the treadmill of professional necessity is not always imposed from outside. Sometimes the performer builds it themselves, one losing bet at a time. Lord Lucan. Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, is the most dramatic figure on this list and the one whose story ended not in bankruptcy, but in something far darker. Lucan was a member of the British aristocracy. a man of ancient lineage and inherited prestige who moved through the exclusive clubs of Mayfair with the absolute authority of someone who has never been seriously required to justify himself. He was known for his cold, unshakable demeanor at the card table, a man who projected the impression that losing was something that happened to other people. It was not. Behind the composed exterior, the Lucan estate was being systematically hollowed out. He was losing thousands of pounds in single sittings. His marriage was fracturing under the pressure. His personal life was in a state of private collapse that stood in complete contrast to the image of aristocratic composure he presented to the world. The desperation to recoup his losses drove him into increasingly reckless financial maneuvers and ultimately into the catastrophic events of the night of the 7th of November, 1974, a night that ended with the murder of his children's nanny, Sandra Rivet, and the disappearance of Lord Lucan himself, never to be officially seen again. The gambling wasn't incidental to what happened. It was the engine of his destruction, stripping away his judgment, his stability, and his dignity long before that terrible night. He left behind a mountain of debt, a family in ruins, and one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in British criminal history. His name, which had once carried the weight of centuries of aristocratic lineage, became a synonym for scandal, violence, and cowardice. He vanished. A man who had wagered his entire life on a final desperate play and lost everything, including his place in the world he was born to lead. John Aspinall. John Aspinall occupies a unique position on this list because he was not primarily a man who lost his money gambling elsewhere. He was a man who built his fortune from gambling and then lost it at his own table. Aspinall was a central figure in the British upper class of the 1960s, a man whose social connections included the most powerful politicians and aristocrats of the era. He founded a legendary private gaming club in London Aspinalls that became the destination of choice for the elite who wished to play for genuinely significant sums. The profits were considerable, and he used those profits to fund his real passion, the creation and maintenance of private zoos for endangered species, which he viewed not as an eccentric hobby, but as a genuine conservation mission. The contradiction at the heart of his life was this: the man who made his fortune from the losses of others could not resist sitting on the other side of the table himself. He wagered vast personal sums, partly to maintain his standing among the extraordinarily wealthy men who were his clientele, and partly because his personal philosophy held that a man's character was only truly revealed in moments of total financial peril. The consequence was a permanent state of financial instability that the grandeur of his lifestyle successfully concealed. He was, at various points, a man of immense apparent wealth who lacked the liquid funds to pay his own staff. A single catastrophic week at the table could, and occasionally did, endanger the feeding of the animals in his care. Willie Carson. Willie Carson is a titan of British horse racing, a four-time champion jockey whose tactical brilliance and infectious personality made him one of the most beloved figures the sport has ever produced. He rode winners in the most prestigious races the turf has to offer, including the Epsom Derby, and the national recognition his career generated was matched by genuine financial success. He built a successful stud farm and established a legacy that on paper extended far beyond his days in the saddle. The conflict emerged from the very world that had made him famous. The transition from professional participant to spectator is, for many within the racing industry, a financially perilous one. And Carson's deep expertise in the sport led him to believe, with some justification, but ultimately with far too much confidence, that his knowledge could consistently outmaneuver the odds. He placed substantial wagers. He risked sums that exceeded his regular income. The racecourse, which had been his professional home for decades, became a source of significant and sustained financial drain. The consequence was a severe period of financial restructuring. The immense fortune he had built during his riding career was significantly diminished. Difficult decisions regarding business ventures and property followed. He learned, at considerable personal cost, that the view from the grandstand is an entirely different proposition from the view from the saddle, and that expertise in one does not transfer to the other. Shane Richie. Shane Richie is the one name on this list whose story does not end in loss. And that, in itself, makes him the most instructive case of all. Before EastEnders, before the role of Alfie Moon made him a genuine national figure, Richie built a solid career on the holiday camp entertainment circuit, and as a stand-up comedian, he was earning well. His early career provided him with the kind of financial freedom that, managed carefully, could have been the foundation for long-term security. It was not managed carefully. During the mid-1990s, a combination of extravagant living and a habitual relationship with the betting shop began to erode his savings at a rate his income could not sustain. The adrenaline of the wager, which he has spoken about with candor in subsequent years, became a distraction from the pressures of a fluctuating career, which itself exacerbated the cycle. What appeared from the outside to be the life of a successful entertainer was, in reality, a facade held together by mounting debts and an increasingly unmanageable deficit. The consequence was absolute and total financial collapse. Shane Richie was homeless. He slept in his car. A man who had been earning serious money in the British entertainment industry was reduced to that. There was no soft landing, no quiet restructuring, just the brutal arithmetic of a life spent beyond its means, arriving at its logical conclusion. The difference between Richie's story and those of the other 11 men on this list is what came next. He did not disappear. He did not accept ruin as a permanent state. He rebuilt from nothing with the role of Alfie Moon on EastEnders, providing both the platform and the income to restore what had been lost. He is one of the very few figures from this particular chapter of British celebrity financial history who managed to piece the story back together. His experience stands as both a warning and, uniquely on this list, a testament to what is possible when the wreckage is confronted honestly and the work begins again. 12 men, 12 careers that, by any objective measure, were extraordinary. And in each case, the same pattern, the same systematic, deliberate transfer of everything they had built into the hands of bookmakers, casino proprietors, and the implacable mathematics of a game that was never designed to be won. What this collection of lives tells us is not that gambling is uniformly ruinous. Plenty of people place a flutter on the Grand National and go home no worse for it. What it tells us is that for a particular type of person, driven, competitive, accustomed to the high of performance and public adulation, the betting shop and the casino offers something that ordinary life, for all its material comforts, cannot. The possibility of a moment where everything changes, the next hand, the next race, the next number. It is the same instinct that made these men brilliant at what they did, and it is the instinct that consumed them. If this has given you something to think about, and I believe it has, then I want you to do 3 things right now. Subscribe to Vintage Uncovered if you have not already done so. This is the channel that publishes the stories the official histories leave out, the truths the obituaries quietly omit, and the records that deserve to be set straight. Hit the like button if this is the kind of content you want more of. It tells us we are doing something right. And drop a comment below telling me which of these 12 stories surprised you most. I read every single one. Until next time, this has been Vintage Uncovered, the truth about the icons.